about Operation Protective Edge, which happened just 2 summers ago. If you can see this Ethiopian woman who's there putting birthday balloons for her son, who also fell in that same battle. So may this also be for the memory of her son and all the other soldiers buried here who were killed and murdered in that operation. So it starts like this. 3 teenage boys in a town near Jerusalem are kidnapped from a bus stop. And all of the IDF and all of Israel are searching for them. They're looking high, they're looking low, they're looking in Arab places and outside Arab places to try to find these 3 kidnapped boys who were 16, 17, one was 16, 2 were 17, on their way home from high school. After lots of searches in many different places, we figured out that these boys were buried and they were killed. They were just murdered as they were kidnapped into that vehicle. And all this happening aroused aroused Hamas, the terrorist organization sitting in Gaza, to launch hundreds of rockets every single day to cities in the southern edge of Israel. And there are plenty of pictures of families running to shelter. Schools are closed down. People don't go to work anymore. Everyone knows that they have 30 seconds to be in a shelter in the case where a rocket is fired. 30 seconds. Could you imagine what you could do in 30 seconds? And that's something that these people are starting to get used to. This is 1 month and 2 months and 3 months. And the IDF has to try to find and hit those rockets in a very dense populated area. And the IDF is hitting back, but only from the air, because going into Gaza is a very dangerous task. The war continues, and 5 gunmen from Hamas pop out of a tunnel on the Israeli side of the border and run towards one of these settlements to try to kill as many people as possible. And only then does Israel realize that we have a huge problem on our hands. These are gunmen that are 1 or 2 kilometers away from our settlements, and they have now access to tunnels that go under the border, and we have to go on a justice and on a correct mission to try to combat those tunnels. And so the IDF decides that they are launching a ground operation into Gaza, which is a very, very difficult task in a highly dense populated area with only guerrilla fighting as opposed to fighting an army. Very, very difficult, but that's what the people need, and that's what the IDF is there for, to protect its people. On June 20th, Golani, my brigade, was one of the first brigades to cross the border and to launch the attack into Gaza. And the beginning of the fight is always the hardest part, with a large open area that you need to cross in order to get to the buildings. And as Max and his friends were sitting in an APC, they were ambushed by many different sets of tunnels, and I spoke to a few people about how fighting in Gaza looks. But the way they do it is they have tunnels from building to building to building. They don't stand and fight against you, and once you conquer them, you pass them. It's not a war for territory. It's a war to see how many Jews, how many Israeli soldiers they're able to kill. They know they'll lose. We are so much stronger than them. We have a huge army, and they're just groups of militants. They're not even an army. But what they do is they pop out from one building, hit an RPG, and before you can respond to that building, they run around through their tunnels and pop out in a different place, which makes the fighting extremely, extremely difficult. Furthermore, they fire from hospitals and from schools, and I've seen it in my own eyes. And these are places where you can't just bomb them down. It's very easy to collapse a building on a tunnel, but when on the roof, they force their civilians to stand on the roof. No plane is going to fire at that building, even though we know that a Hamas gunman will come out of that building and shoot his RPG or whatever his weapons that he uses. And on that first night, as the Golani forces were going into Gaza City, they were ambushed by a few tunnels, and the APC that Max was in ended up going up on fire, and he and 7 of his friends all died together. And that was the highest moment of casualties of one specific battle, one specific fight. 7 brothers trained together, brought up together from all different corners of Israeli society, all going up in flames together on that ambush. And that's the end. And I want to start from the beginning. Max grew up in Los Angeles, surprising enough. And Max grew up in a family very similar to all your families, with very little Judaism to them, not really affiliated with the country of Israel. Grew up playing baseball, grew up playing football. He snowboarded. He loved Bob Marley, and he's a Patriots fan. He came on Taglit came on birthright. One of the soldiers on his birthright group was from Golani, and he decided that I want to be like that soldier. I want to be just like him. I want to live for a purpose. I want to live for a cause. And he came back to the U.S. at the end of birthright, only to re-enlist in the Israeli army, in the IDF, as a lone soldier, leaving his family at home and coming to serve in the IDF without a single word of Hebrew. And that's where I come into the picture. I'm now already just over a year in the military, and I finished my training. I finished my commander's course, and my job was to accept new recruits to the army and to train them from day one until they're ready to be combat soldiers, ready for battle. And I get my group of 16 soldiers. One of them is Max, and I remember the first day just looking at his eyes and telling them to go upstairs and put their bags on the bed. The most simple task that you can possibly imagine, and Max just stands there staring at me. I have no clue what you're talking about. And with these blank eyes, what do I do? How do I acclimate? What's supposed to happen here? And you would think that a soldier like Max should always be behind. He would be the last one to choose a bed. He'll be the worst shooter because he doesn't understand the lessons teaching him. He'll be the last one and always need help. Max was about this tall. He was tiny. He was a very small guy. But Max had a ton of determination. He was motivated to no end. And on one of the hardest marches that we do in Golani, which is climbing Mount Hermon, the tallest mountain in Israel, Max was first. And not only was he first, he carried the water pack. And I told him, Max, you know what? There's so many stronger people here. Just leave it for someone else. But no. Max said, I want this. This is for me. I want to push myself as hard as I can go. And I want to do as much as I can for my country, for the Israeli people. Max loved the IDF. He was adopted by a family in the south, in a kibbutz, that they didn't know him in advance. He never met them. They barely spoke English, but he became good friends with them. He had a few other friends that came with him from LA. And that was Max's vacation. When I would go home and I would spend Shabbat with my family, as you saw, Shabbat could be very meaningful, Max would go home to no family. Max would go home to a bunch of friends that some of them were in the army, some of them weren't, and that's just a completely different life. He was actually at my house. I invited him, despite being his commander and ordering him around all day effectively to try and train him. He was at my house twice. That's how it works in the IDF. It's brotherhood. I'd like to tell another story. Max told me in the beginning that he wants to be a sharpshooter. And he just thought that the gun, which is this gun that he's holding here, with it's called a Trieg scope ×4, that's something that he thought was so cool. He wanted to be that shooter. And you have shooting tryouts in the first week of shooting practice. Everyone shoots. I see that Max is just not hitting the target. And I'm like, this guy came half across the world to become, and this is what he wants. I'm going to be the one to hold him back for being a sharpshooter. And I sat with him in the shooting range. I let all my other soldiers just do their thing, and I'm like, okay, I'm focusing on Max right now. I'm making sure that he's able to fulfill his dream and his goal, and he couldn't hit. He just wouldn't hit. And I remember taking the notebook from my lieutenant at the time and changing his scores to give him to make sure that he's first and he gets the sharpshooter, because I believed in Max. And I saw his determination, and in sharpshooter's course he ended up being first. Better than all the Israelis, and he would hit the 300 on the dot every single time, because that's who he was, and he would focus until he would succeed. He had amazing determination. I had the privilege of being Max's commander for 8 months till he finished his training, and then I was sent to officer's course to become an officer, and then return to that same base and that same job with more responsibility. And just as I started officer's course, this whole operation was launched, and you can't even imagine what it is to train soldiers, to build a bond with them, to believe in them, and to take them from day one till they're a fighting unit. Day one where they don't even know each other, they don't know how to hold a gun, they don't know anything. To the day, 8 months later, where they're a fighting unit, they're together. Max told Nissan, an Israeli from a Moroccan background that lives in Lod, that he would take a bullet for him because he's his brother. He told him that on the entrance to Gaza that first night. Nissan survived and Max didn't. Nissan was just outside that APC. And I remember feeling, just as I was in that officer's course, that 7 of these guys went together. 3 of them were my soldiers. But Max and I had a very, very special connection. I'm in touch with his family to this day, and we're very, very close about that. On his Memorial Day, we all come to his grave, and we make it a whole meaningful ceremony. But the story doesn't end here. Typically, if someone passes away, their body is put into the ground, and they're left with some sort of memorial, such as these, with a flag, maybe with a picture, and that's where it leads. But Max's life continues, and I'll explain to you why. I was privileged not to be in Gaza during that time, and I carried Max's casket on his last journey, climbing up this hill in Jerusalem and putting him here in the spot where he will lay forever. And you think we have a lone soldier coming halfway across the world that knows probably 100 people in this country. 40 of them are in the army and can't be released, obviously, because they're busy fighting. How many people do you think will attend that funeral? So not only did one person, or two people, or three people attend this funeral, if you can just picture this whole area, not just this area, the ramps up here and the whole porch up top there, and all the way down there, 30,000 people from all over the country came to Max's funeral. They all, except for maybe handfuls of people, didn't even know who Max was. They've never heard his name before. And this happened not once in this operation, but twice and three times with lone soldiers that have no family to cry for them. It happened in Haifa with another lone soldier, and it continues to happen. And you ask yourself, why? Remember that in Israel, it's not like fighting in Iraq or in Afghanistan, where the fighting is very far away from you. Every single person in this country, at time of war, knows somebody in fighting. The army is built 75%, even more, on reserves. And I'm still a soldier today, despite being released from the army, because that's how it is. Many of the men go back to war. We are still a country fighting for our existence. And not only that, but rockets are still flying over Netivot, over Beersheba, over all these settlements and cities in the south, and people are still running for shelter during the war. But they drop that all at home, and they come here to pay last respects for Max and for other soldiers that have fallen with him. And to me, that symbolizes the brotherhood and the connection that is made in this place and in the Jewish people as a whole. You could be Israeli, you could be from a different country, you could be Sephardi, you could be Ashkenazi, you could be religious, you could be secular, you could be ultra-religious. And at times, these people seem so different to us. What do we have to do with them? But when we're defending each other, then that becomes something much, much more meaningful. And Max's life continues, and there are scholarships set up in Israel in Max's name. The synagogue, the ancient synagogue in the Arbel, is built as a memorial for Max and for his story. And many, many other projects, Torah scrolls being written in his name, synagogues being brought up, and many people sending Max's parents, my friends Stuart and Evie Steinberg, citizens and residents of LA, many notes and many letters about how Max's story inspired them to take some sort of action in their life. Some people have come to Israel and enlisted in Golani or in the IDF or in other units, and some people have their other ways of connection. But they all realized that this is something very, very special, and Max lives on in my heart and in the heart of the Jewish people forever. On Max's grave it said, and I'll read it to you, you can still sit, something that Bob Marley used to say, and Max really connected with. It says, live for yourself and you will live in vain. Live for others and you will live again. And my soldier, my brother, and in a way as a commander, my son, dedicated his life to living for others, was proud and eager to go into Gaza despite a small injury that he had beforehand, despite being in LA and flying back to this country, LA on vacation with his family, flying back to this country to reconnect with his brothers and go into Gaza together as a unit, because that's where he felt part. And that's where his connection to Judaism and to the Jewish people and to the state of Israel lied, and he wouldn't have missed that for the world. And I'm sure that Max is up there in heaven, watching over us and proud to see how many people are inspired by him, and how a story of one single person that did one move in his life ended up sparking hearts of thousands and of hundreds of thousands of people. And you see that this grave is still one of the most popular graves on any tour towards Har Herzl, despite not knowing anyone, because of this amazing story. And on a personal note, I'd like to add that one of the things that Max told me, I mean, as a commander, you're not supposed to speak to them in English because everyone, it's a crew-based army, and I would cheat every now and then just so that Max could understand. And he told me, Ariel, what sparked my move and my change in my life was being on Taglit. Please go on Taglit and speak to Taglit members about this story. This is my first time because I was recently released, and I'm privileged to be with you, and hopefully I'll be continuing to do this, sharing Max's story and following his wish that I remember that he shared with me, not on his last day, but somewhere along the path, to continue to tell people about him and about his story, and I'm sure there are many other people that do the same, like the wonderful tour guides. And thank you guys for listening, and you guys can all feel free to pay respects to